This is YouTube's favorite lens, and if you have a pulse in a camera, you've probably heard of it. That's because this has been the king of price to performance ratio for almost a decade. Let's talk about why. This is the Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens, and even in 2026, it punches way above its price point. At the time of filming this video, you can find it new for about $500. And while $500 is still a lot of money in my book, this lens rivals the performance of lenses that are twice its price. And over the almost 9 years that it's been available, the price really hasn't changed much. The first great thing about this lens is that you can buy it for almost any camera. So it comes with micro four thirds and APS-C, which I have. I don't think you can buy it for a full frame mount, but you can buy it for pretty much any crop sensor camera. I've personally been using the micro four thirds version of this lens with my Lumix G7 for a little bit of live streaming here and there. So I've been using it on that camera for about 4 years, and I've been really impressed with the image quality that I get out of this camera with this lens. So much so that it's actually the first lens that I bought for my APS-C camera, the Sony a6400. And that is the camera and lens combination that I'm using to shoot this video. This lens is so nice, I bought it twice. I would say this is probably one of the most usable prime lenses that you can buy, especially as a beginner. On an APS-C sensor, the effective focal length is 24 millimeters, which is actually the same as you would find on an iPhone. This focal length is also perfect for creators that are in small spaces because this camera is only, I can reach out and touch it. It's actually spent most of its life mounted to my desk. I use this lens for streaming. I use this lens for talking head videos, B-roll, action shots. If I'm recording, this lens is attached to my camera. Now, if you know much about cameras, you know that the biggest drawback of using a crop sensor camera is that you are not able to capture as much light in the smaller sensor. And this lens combats that. The wide aperture allows me to use it in a dark bedroom without turning on a blinding light. I can also get a shallower depth of field, blurring the background, which is essentially easy mode for getting a professional looking shot. So right now, I think the aperture is set to like 3.5, so I'm not really utilizing that in this video. But I'll show you some different shots when I have the aperture at f1.4 and I get a lot of background blur and bokeh. This lens is just really good for beginners and people with minimalist setups because you don't need as much light for it. Not to mention it's a lot cheaper to buy an APS-C camera than it is a full frame camera. So this is just a really good lens for people on a budget, beginners, people that don't have a ton of equipment, people that don't have a ton of space. It just lets in as much light as you can on an APS-C camera, which is going to be a cheaper setup for you all around. So in this video, I'm actually stopped down to aperture 3.5, which is actually the minimum aperture that the kit lens can go. So I have pretty bright lighting going on. I have my window open. And so the kit lens is going to perform pretty well. But if we drop down the lights, the Sigma is going to beat it in every way. Let me open the aperture up in front of you guys here, actually. That's stopping it down. Hang on. All right, so that's f1.4. It obviously looks pretty terrible because I'm overexposed, but let's drop down the lights. How am I going to do this? Okay, a couple things to mention here. The white balance is going to be off because my curtains are not pure white. So I probably look a little bit orange, a little bit yellow. But just look at the background blur compared to what it was before. And also, I did not screw around with the background lighting. So the background lighting is obviously going to look much brighter when you open up the aperture like that. All right, so I just turned that lamp on. So hopefully you can see some of the bokeh there. The kit lens could never. So yeah, it's just going to perform a lot better in low light situations. I guess I could throw on the kit lens and show you what that looks like under these lighting conditions. Okay, so I've switched over to the kit lens. This is what it looks like under not so ideal lighting conditions. This is wide open as it's letting in as much light as it possibly can. So it's incredibly easy to use because it's not very far away from me. I don't need a lot of light. And it just makes it very comfortable to use during long filming sessions. So I've been screwing around with this lens for pretty much all day. And one thing I did was update the firmware. And it took the autofocus performance from really good to excellent. See if I can get this thing to focus on me now. As you can see, the autofocus is really snappy, very responsive. I'm pretty impressed with it. So let's compare this to a native lens. So a native Sony lens should have the best autofocus performance. So I'm going to compare the Sigma to the kit lens here, which should perform very well. Okay, so I tried to involve our cat into the testing, and she wasn't really cooperating when I was testing the Sigma lens. So I decided to just use myself as well, so I apologize for that. So the testing with my cat maybe isn't as useful, but I just thought I'd leave it in because I thought it was cute. So in the testing, I'm using face detection autofocus in the camera settings. So it should snap onto her face and then hopefully my face. And I found when testing both of these lenses that they were very, very close. And if they were unlabeled, there's just no way that I would know which one was which just based on the autofocus test. If I had to say something, I would say maybe the kit lens is just a hair smoother. Sometimes it looks like the Sigma lens overcorrects just a little bit and then comes right back into focus. But man, it is close. Yeah, we're really splitting hairs here. Yeah, the kit lens might just be a hair snappier and just a little smoother, but both are more than usable for anybody. I ripped a couple still images straight from the autofocus test to kind of show you guys a few other differences between the kit lens and the Sigma lens. The kit lens, there's definitely a little bit more vignetting going around the edges of the frame as well as in the corners. You can see it's a little bit darker. The Sigma lens is also rendering color a little bit warmer. So to my eye, I would say that the kit lens is a little bit more natural looking in the sense that that's actually what the room kind of looks like when we were doing this test. And the Sigma lens is just a touch warmer. That's just going to be a personal preference. You can obviously adjust for that with your white balance in camera or in your software if you'd like. I don't think that's really that big of a deal. But when we zoom in super close to her face, which I'm sure she'll appreciate, the Sigma lens is definitely rendering more detail in the skin texture and the freckling on her face, as well as in the hair. You could see more individual strands in the hair, some coming off of her shoulder as well. It's definitely a softer look in her hair on the kit lens, which again might look a little bit more natural. And above her head, you could see the hair on the kit lens is kind of just blending into the background, blurring into the background. And then on the Sigma lens, you could still kind of see the individual hairs. So Sigma lens is certainly sharper, runs maybe a little bit warmer in color tone, and has a little bit less vignetting. But a lot of people add that in post anyway. So now I don't have an unlimited amount of lenses to test. But when people do put this lens up against its direct competitors, it always does well on things like sharpness, autofocus performance, bokeh, distortion, vignetting, chromatic aberration, and a bunch of other things that you probably haven't even thought about yet. Now, about the only thing this lens doesn't have is stabilization. So if you have a camera that has in-body stabilization, that's probably not that big a deal. Or if you have a gimbal, then it doesn't really matter either. I pretty much always use this lens mounted to a tripod or my desk. I do go handheld to get some B-roll sometimes, and it's really hasn't been that big of an issue for me. But if I was doing it all the time, I would probably want a camera that has stabilization in it. Or if I didn't have that, I would want a lens that has stabilization. And this one doesn't, so just keep that in mind. Now, as far as build quality goes, this lens feels very durable, feels very solid in the hand. It's a combination of metal, durable plastic. It has a really nice weight to it, and I would say overall, it just feels like I'm holding a premium lens. The focus ring is rubberized and has a really satisfying resistance when I'm changing what's in focus. Now, the company that makes this lens, Sigma, they've been around for a very long time and they're very well reviewed. So you can feel confident when buying their products. So if you're in the market for this lens, there may be a few other lenses that you're considering. The Viltrox 15mm f1.7 lens is a smaller, cheaper, more lightweight option. At 15mm, it's a slightly wider field of view, but I don't know if you're going to really notice much of a difference with it. The aperture is a little bit more narrow, so it's not going to let in as much light. It's not going to blur the background as easily as the Sigma will. But if you're on a stricter budget, I don't think you can really go wrong with that lens either. So Sigma actually released a update to this lens. It's the 15mm f1.4 lens, so you get a little bit wider field of view, just like the Viltrox. It's a little bit more expensive. I don't think you're getting a lot of different features or anything groundbreaking over the 16mm. If you already have this lens, don't even consider upgrading. It's not worth it. But it is going to be smaller. It's going to be lighter. And at 15mm, it is going to be a little bit wider field of view. So if you're deciding between the two and they're the same price, I would probably go with the 15mm. If I was saving money, I'd probably go with the 16mm still. They just haven't given me a compelling reason to upgrade yet. Now, another strength of this lens is that it's been around for a very long time. So if you want to go secondhand with your purchases, I actually bought both of my copies secondhand used on Facebook Marketplace. and I saved quite a bit of money. They're like half. I think I got both of them for $250 a piece, which performance per dollar there is insane. So if you're shooting a wide variety of content, or if you're mostly doing talking head or live streaming, I mean, you really can't go wrong with this lens. And if you're looking for a budget camera to go along with this lens, just click on this video next.